probability or the likelihood of a specific outcome to happen. So for us, probability is something we use in genetics as well as in predictions of information. So what is the likelihood of this trait being inherited if these two individuals were to reproduce? So for us, we're going to be taking a look at coins before we get into the genetics aspect of probability. So remember, pennies, they only have two sides, heads or tails. What I did was I went to this random generator and I had it flip a coin 5 times. So for my penny, out of the 5 flips, the first one was heads, the second one was tails, the third one was tails, the fourth one was tails, and the final flip was heads. So we're going to document that on our chart, just like this, with just H for heads, T for tails. Nice and simple. But next, we're going to find our percentage. So how we're going to do that is we're going to take the outcome. So we had 2 heads out of 5 flips. So first of all, we're just going to get a good old calculator and we're going to divide. So 2 divided by 5, 0.4. But remember, percentage means out of 100. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our 0.4 and we're going to multiply it by 100 to get 40%. So 40% of our coins ended up being heads. What about tails? So here we have 3 out of 5 for tails. So again, all we're going to do is we're going to divide 3 divided by 5. We get 0.6 times it by 100 for our percentage, 60%. Awesome, 60%. But what about when it says this probability? Well, let's think. So we had 2 sides of our coin. So what is the likelihood that our first 2 flips are going to be tails? So remember, our coin never changes. It always has those 2 sides. So if our first 2 flips were tails, we have 1 out of 2 for tails times another 1 out of 2 for tails. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our 2 fractions and we're going to multiply them together. So remember, multiplying fractions. Multiply the top to the top and the bottom to the bottom. So 1 times 1, that's just going to be 1. 2 times 2, well, that's going to be 4. So the likelihood of us getting our first 2 flips out of those 5 to be tails is 1 out of 4 tries or attempts. So it's that's fair. We could probably get it done. But what if we changed it up? Let's see. So what if we said we wanted all of them to be tails? So how many flips did we do? We did 5. So each flip had 2 sides it could be landing on. It could either be heads or tails. Can't be both. It's not a trick. But if I went tails, let's figure out the probability to that. So we're just going to break it down. 2 times 2, that gives us 4. 4 times the next 2, that's 8. 8 times the next 2, that's 16. 16 times our last 2, that's 32. And then, of course, we're going to multiply the top. 1 times 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 1. That's easy. That's just 1. So the likelihood of having all 5 of our flips be tails is 1 out of 32 tries. That's not as great. Let's see here. So what is the probability that our coins came out the way they did? So remember, we did 5 flips. We had 1 head, 2 heads, and 3 tails. So we're just going to do the same thing. Our coins still have the ability to be either side. And so our 3 in the middle were tails. And our first and our last were heads. So all we're going to do is just multiply straight across again. So we should get our 1 out of 32. Awesome. Now, we can apply this same thing and sort of figure out the probability of offspring outcome. So, in a chromosomal standpoint, we deem males as having an X and a Y chromosome. And in a chromosomal standpoint, for female, it is 2 X chromosomes. So, we have both of those genders receive half of that information from one parent and half from another. So, males, we have an X chromosome. They always get that from their mother, who has 2 X chromosomes. Whereas the Y came from the father. For daughters, they got 1 of their X chromosomes from their mother, and they got the other X chromosome from their father. So they are XX. So mathematically, we have about a 50-50% chance of this happening, of either being one or the other, getting an X and a Y or getting an XX chromosome. So for us, we have to ask ourselves, okay, so in a chromosomal standpoint, we have 2 different outcomes available. What is the probability that we are going to get 2 siblings that are both boys? So they both have an X, Y, X, Y. So we're just going to have our probability set up. We have 1/2 times 1/2. That is going to be what? I'm going to have you guys solve that one. For question 2, here we have a group of siblings, 2 girls and 2 boys. Well, what is the probability of ending up with that combo of siblings, 2 and 2? So for us, we have a grand total of 4 different outcomes. We had 2 girls, 2 boys. So remember, we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to multiply the bottoms, and we're going to multiply the tops to find our probability fraction. I'm going to have you guys try that one out. And then finally, this one's about you and your family. What is the probability of the amount of siblings and that outcome? So for me, I only have 1 sibling. So that means there are 2 individuals that we are going to be looking at, myself and my sibling. And what is the likelihood of us having the chromosome combination that we do? So us having an XX versus their chromosome combination, an XY in my case. So your information here is going to be different than mine, unless you only have 1 other sibling. And then it's going to be very similar. If you have more siblings, it's going to have more information to calculate probability. If you are by yourself, it's just going to have you. That's it. The probability of you is 1/2. Nice and easy. But if you have siblings, it's a little more information.